This is the GMS Magazine podcast. Humans, I am Paco Garcia, your host. This is our first official podcast of 2024. Hello, Chris.
Hello, this is Chris from DSX Machina and Tavern Snaps.
Ooh, that's
Again,
yeah. We're rebranching. Just so
we're
you know,
rebranching.
yeah. Just so you know,
I gotta, I
humans.
gotta, I gotta send you some crackers too.
I love that. Actually, why don't you bring them? I dare you.
That's a that's that's a really solid idea, and it's something that I still want to do. Uh, but my Christmas was very good for me. How was it for you?
Well, it was intense. It was very long in places, and it was absolutely relaxing and absolutely beautiful in other places. Because, well, I went to see family, which is always very stressful because my family are made of, you know, issues, big ones. But I got to see my nieces, which is not bad at all. And then I spent New Year's Eve with Martin, and I cooked a 9-kilo turkey.
I didn't know turkeys came in 9 kilos.
Oh, they can come bigger than that. I mean, turkeys
Whoa,
can be
Lordy.
huge. And in this case, I did order a 5 kilos one because it's just the two of us. But no, it had to be an 8.5 kilos. And if you put on top of that the whole stuffing, and I do put a lot of stuffing, that was a big bird. Huge bird. So I am going to have turkey in the freezer for the foreseeable future.
So for me, this is something I'm going to do and make sure I'm going to do it right. Every year I do a charcuterie.
Oh, yes.
It is I last year, as some people might know, for the people who follow this, mom, that last year I did a charcuterie tree,
Yes, I
which
remember
was a
that.
vertical 2.5 foot tall charcuterie on a daisy wheel that you could rotate. This year, I went and I decided to try something a little different. We were going to go with a water theme. We couldn't really make that work. Um, and I'm going to see about if I can make this work. Oh, there it is. And I'm going to show you.
Okay, where? Give me a second because okay. Okay.
So this is uh, my charcuterie wreaths. We were going to make 2 or 3. We ended up making 4.
Okay.
Um, so so we made 4 of these. This is one of them. This is the cheese one. Various cheeses, some whipped honey, my homemade pepper paste. This is there isn't any cheese in the wheel, so we took this Capello pepper, this pepper cheese. I bought a pepper cheese wheel for about $100. I cut the top off of it. I scooped out the inside. I turned it into a cheese sauce and poured it back in. That's so you don't see the cheese sauce in there. And we surrounded it by various meats. This is one we're particularly proud of.
Wow.
This is our big charcuterie with a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. You can just see just everything's going on there. And then finally, our little skewer base charcuterie. You can pull a skewer out. Now, obviously, you can see where we got
the stars from, yes.
The stars from there, yeah. So that
that
was our charcuterie. We made 4 of them. My wife and I worked together on this, and so that's what we did. That was that's what I did. That was our big Christmas thing. And we had a nice Christmas dinner. I'm not a huge, particularly fan of Christmas turkey. My mom made a pretty good one this year, but I'm not a journal fan. I like my food segmented. I like my food separate. Like I don't like my food mixing. And so the idea of like 14 different things on a plate and then packed on with mashed potatoes and then you pour gravy the whole thing. It's kind of revolting. It triggers me. So I like all my things segmented. So I'll have a small plate and then I'll go up for seconds and I'll get a small plate. And that's how I am. And then I also got Christmas stuff. And not that I'll show you, but my Christmas gifts. Did you get any Christmas gifts or game related?
Well, actually, that's where I am going to be very disappointed this year because I did not. All my Christmas gifts this year have been food related. All of them.
I have no problem with that. God knows I'd love to have more food related gifts. We bought a new. We got like useful stuff. We got clothes. We got a new toilet, some shelving, but we got some games.
I did not.
What kind of food?
Well, Martin bought me. I like sous vide food.
I love sous vide. I'm actually making sous vide today.
Well,
Right
I
after this
absolutely
podcast.
love it. I used to make the whole sous vide thing in a big, massive pot that used to take an awful lot of water and an awful lot of space. So Martin has
Mhm.
bought me a specific sous vide container where you can put your runner, your sous vide machine, in my case, is an ANOVA machine, inside,
Mhm.
and everything is kept under water. It requires a lot less water and is way, way tidier than a big pan. So that is fantastic. And in fact, I've spent the last 2 days, I still have some pork ribs, which are going to be sous vide for 72 hours
Oh,
before they go under the grill to just roast nicely and be devoured. Um, and he also got me, which I am beyond myself with excitement, a vacuum chamber sealer.
yeah, I got one of those. Yeah, very useful for sous vide.
They are absolutely unbelievable. And this one, also from the brand Nova, by the way, not sponsoring this podcast, it comes with some programs so you can do pickling and infusing. So if you put a little jar with olive oil and put 3 or 4 cloves of garlic and some chili in it, and you give the infuse program, it will release all the oils from the garlic and the chili and put it into the olive oil, in a matter of 2 minutes. And it just tastes beyond incredible. Or put some syrup on some fruit and give it to the pickling, and it will pickle the fruit in syrup in an absolutely unbelievable way. So, I had a. It's amazing. It's just absolutely perfect.
I'm fasting right now.
I am sorry.
Yeah, so I'll go through the quick games that we picked up.
Please.
We've actually played one of them, and I'll talk about that. My wife got for her birthday, she got Bananagrams, which she's been waiting for a very long time.
Okay.
This is obviously kind of a party game, but it's a game where you just make words as quickly as possible. And that's that one. We got this other party game called Sweet and Spicy, because obviously I like my hot sauces. We haven't played this one yet. I don't know what it's going to come out of it. I'm probably going to bring up this with Jamie Stegmeyer. I got the last, supposedly, expansion for Tapestries, Fantasies and Futures, which I am very interested in trying out. But what gives with the package? Like it came in an envelope. I'm a little confused that is that the general release that you buy this in an envelope?
I don't know. We should ask him.
I'm going to ask him, and I love the fact that it has a brand new rule book, so it replaces the old rule book, and yet another third round of errata to fix the rules of the base game. This is the third time that they have altered the rules of the core game. Because the game, I love it. I actually love Tapestry. It's one of my wife's favorite games, but it is hella easy to exploit if you have the right. I told you about the one time where I got her score was 150 and my score was 525. Something happened with mine. I just went off to beat that. This game is a tile-based game. I love the art style. It is called Darwinaut.
That rings a bell, actually.
Yeah, Chris Bryant. I don't know who these people are. I don't know Green Couch Games, but that is Darwinauts. Very interesting art style. I really love this visual style. Looks very similar art style now that I'm thinking about it to Rising 5. I wonder if the artist was similar. It is the same artist. It's a very similar art style to Rising 5. It's tile based. A game I'm interested in playing, Autobahn. I always like car themed games. So this is Autobahn. This is by Alley Cat Games. It is very interesting. I'm looking forward to that one. One that I bought for a friend and me, and I love this, and it's going to be a very interesting idea. The game is called The Great Belgium Beer Race. Or sorry, the Belgium Beers Race. I thought it was a Great Belgium Beer Race. It's just the Belgium Beer Race. And it is a game about you going on a journey through Belgium beer country. Now, if that doesn't sound slightly familiar, the game that I made called Naramata is taking a tour through Okanagan wine country. So why do I think these games may have something beyond the fact that it looks to be a road, a map that you follow on a road?
Yeah.
But I found out that all the breweries in this game are real. And there is a guide to the breweries inside the book, inside the box, which is something that's very similar to Naramata. I'm very happy that somebody else did this. We have a game called Windward. This is a competitive game with some kind of cooperative element, but it is a exploration game. It has a lot of doohickeys, a lot of tokens, a lot of things. There's some dice, but you're basically exploring this fictional skyway with your little flying vehicle. The vehicles are multicolored, so that the vehicles themselves have a very specific color, but then the sails can't really sync well. But the sails here are the color coded to the player. So you actually, and they come pre-assembled too. You don't even have to build them. And then there are little tiny meeples for your smaller ships, and you've got also the monsters because there's a bunch of there's floating sky whales. So it is a sailors in sky. This is not an original idea. I've seen a lot of stories. There's some short films, some CG films that have been about the idea of flying ships in the clouds, hunting down flying animals for sport. But just the idea was terribly interesting. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the game that's going on my cell pile.
Well, a second, because wait until you turn to the camera, otherwise I cannot barely hear you.
Yeah. And now we're talking about the game that is on my cell pile. This game is on my cell pile for reasons that'll come clear. Castles of Bad King Ludwig.
Yeah.
One of extremely popular game. It is published by Bezier Games. In fact, some of the design of this game was done by a friend of mine who worked on this. He worked on this, and he did Palace of Bad King Ludwig, which was the follow-up, the sequel of this. In fact, Jamie Stegmaier made a crossover, which is between two castles of Mad King Ludwig, which we own, but we've never played. But this is the Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I prefer this over Palace. Palace is a very. Have you played either game?
I played Castles a long time ago. Very long time ago. Yeah. And it was entertaining.
Yeah. I enjoyed the game a lot. I think it has a very interesting balancing mechanic where the person who selects the tiles places them on the score tracker, but the other person gets to pay first. And the other person pays you for the tiles. And then when it's reversed, you do the exact same thing. And there's actually very few moments in the game where you have to stop and get money from the bank. It's a very interesting. It actually, when we played it just last, we were just it was like we only did it once because we were able to share the economy between us. I thought that was very interesting. But this is Castle of Mad King Ludwig. Palace is a much more traditional square tile. But the castles can go crazy. Like there are different sizes of rooms. There are different sizes, different shapes of rooms. So you can have truly unique construction, and crafting games is something that my wife and I really enjoy. She loves it. I prefer castles over Palace. I think my wife likes Palace over castles. But we ended up getting the expansion box. There's one called expansions, where they bundle all the expansions of Mad King Ludwig and put it into one box. So we bought that, but to our shock, we realized that the expansion is incompatible with this game.
What?
Because I forgot that I'm not sure when, a couple of years ago, they came out with a Kickstarter version for a revised second edition Uber version of Castle of Mad King Ludwig. This second edition has better artwork on the tiles. It refines the rules a little bit. It adds this gigantic scoring board. There's a whole new mechanic involving swans. And not only that, but it also was a big box that refined it. They had game trays in there. So we came to our shock that we realized we bought expansions for a game that we couldn't play.
Oh, dear.
So we ended up just recently getting the second edition. So this is the second edition, and let's see if this will not get zeroed out by the thing. You can see
Wow.
the size difference between these two.
It's like twice.
It is, yeah, more than twice the size. There's a couple reasons for that. The first, obviously, is the game tray. All the trays fit in here.
Mhm.
All the expansions fit in here. So this is the expansions and the core set of second edition, which will come into a topic for a future about. It's really interesting how video games get attacked for on-disc DLC or DLC the same day DLC, where they sell you, where they take part of your game away and then sell it to you later. People hate it. This game, this big box, is half empty when you buy it because it's meant to accommodate the expansions. Not only that, but the trays here are extra deep to fit the extra tiles that are in the expansion. So this is everything included. All the expansions fit in this game. And so if someone says, well, how much is the second edition of Castles of Mad King Ludwig? My answer is it's about $100, but they break it into two purchases, but you're buying half a box. It is a complete game. You can still play Castles of Mad King Ludwig, but you are totally being fully aware that you are buying half of a product or 60% of a product because the box is half empty and the trays are half empty because you're expected to get the expansions to fill this out. But this is now a
Well,
filled
but
box.
okay, but I'm not sure I agree with that because at the end of the day, there's a difference between taking away half the game and then, if you want to experience the whole thing, you have to buy everything else, than to say, okay, here's the whole game, and if you want to buy more things, then you can enjoy more things. But I think it's a difference between. And don't get me wrong, I think that there is an awful lot of expansionism in board games that eventually is going to be backfiring. But I don't see that as a bad tactic, one of that Castles game. Because it's basically
Oh yeah,
saying
like I said,
you
people
don't
don't.
need to buy it. This is a complete game. But if you want extra experiences for the game, then you have the space to do it, but you don't have to.
Like I appreciate the fact that there's now a big box version of Scythe, but they weren't planning on doing that. The main core game of Scythe is still fully playable.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll push that out of the side. That was my big purchase. We played the new version of Castles. It is still a game I truly enjoy. We didn't play with all the expansions. We played by some of them. I've seen stories about the deluxe. This is not even the deluxe. There was a Kickstarter exclusive deluxe version, which was even crazier. And apparently, the components are so large, the game is almost unplayable on a standard table surface because the point tracker is colossal. We have the traditional second edition, and so when you go to the second edition and you see people posting photos of this, you're like, that's a little nuts. It's a little crazy. So, but we very much enjoy Castle Mad King Ludwig. I can see us playing it probably a half a dozen more times now, probably more times than Palaces now, which is good because I prefer castles. So that was my Christmas haul, dominated by the castles of Mad King Ludwig.
No, bad at all. I think I could be envious of your gaming related Christmas presents if it wasn't because that, vacuum chamber sealer thing is just
That is really nice.
Yeah, I am absolutely in love with it. So yeah, I'm sorry to say I'm I'm quite happy with what I
The
got.
only advantage I had is that I can at least share my haul, and it would be theme related to what we were talking about because this is a gaming podcast, so I can talk about my games.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. Okay, so we have several things to talk about, and you wanted some topics. So first thing that you had in line is Dunes Uprising's phallic tokens. What?
Okay.
What?
So I have a couple of things in the news, and I want to talk about this because I've been sitting on this for some time. Dune Uprising has Dune Uprising has an expansion, and Dune Imperium Uprising, and I could not help but notice the tokens.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, oh,
So that is Dune, the sandworms from Dune Uprising. Now,
I see.
obviously, they are positioned in an angle that is obviously not becoming.
Yeah, but I can see your point. Um, who's gonna tell them?
I'm sure by this point they very much know. I imagine somebody received the prototype and said, "Guys," and they're like, "It's too late. We're in production. We have to keep going." Oddly enough, I'm sure I can't remember now. I'm sure if I go through my collection, I'll find other suggestive things. But yes, uh,
That is
I
absolutely hilarious in all the best possible ways.
the other thing I wanted to share, obviously next week, hopefully we're gonna get Jamie Stegmeyer back on the program.
That'd be amazing to see him back. I love to see. This is a brilliant guy. And I'm sorry, I need to blow my nose. Ugh. Sorry, humans. But I'll tell you, I have a cold. I'm still here for you all. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, Jamie Stuckmeyer next week. That would be amazing.
He has been heavily promoting. That's all he's been talking about on his channel about his new game. I actually am very excited for this game. I'm going to. I have an image of it now. Wormspan.
Oh, oh. You know, when you wrote it, I thought you were saying, oh, you actually wrote, which I got very excited. You wrote in WhatsApp when you sent me the list, worm spam.
Yes,
And I thought, with worms, with kind of half dragons, that would be amazing.
Okay, I am pulling a funny. This is not the cover of Wormspan.
Oh.
I am going to play a little joke. I think. Obviously, that is not the game in question. That is not Wormspan. Let's just.
Oh no,
that is
I like. That is nice.
So yes, it is obvious. It is a variation of Wingspan. It is called a Wingspan game. This is not an expansion. This is an entirely new beast that is built off of the engine. And Jamie will go into. He's been going into details on his thing. But it's effectively an identical game mechanic of cards, laying it out, and so forth. But there's a few more things. A is that the eggs can develop into dragons, I think. Well, before they could not do that. They could not develop into birds. And there's like a story path across the board, which is also going to be interesting to see. And Jamie will go into details on that. I am truly excited about this game. My only issue, and obviously this is a conversation I'm going to bring up, I can understand why there is no pop culture. So obviously we're not going to have green dragons. We're not going to have chromatic dragons. Although I'm pretty sure they're public domain by this point, because I think you can't really copyright gold dragons. And they're also they're actually part of open source now. So even
exactly. So I think anybody would be able to use them. Also, I very much anybody could copyright a colored dragon. That would be like.
Yeah, but even if they could, they wouldn't have to. But I'm thinking situations like all the famous dragons from Harry Potter, Smog. So none of these dragons are represented. So it has no literary dragons for copyright reasons. But that being said, apparently I don't think there are any mythological dragons. So to my knowledge, they created an entire mythology for this game. So it has a bunch of fictitious dragons that I do believe they made up with a mythology that they made up. It's an entirely fictitious universe, which is a little disappointing considering one of Wingspan's big selling features is that it gave you an actual education on birds. The cards gave you real birds, told you where the birds came from. There was a lot of information on those cards that weren't game related that basically educated you about birds. And I guess the question is that I know that there are hundreds of cards in Wingspan. Are there hundreds of different dragons that they could use, or would they all end up looking the same?
I don't know. But I would be. I mean, I know that there are an awful lot of dragons in myths all over the world, so I can imagine that they would have a ton of them. But I don't think anywhere near enough as many as birds there are in Wingspan, plus the expansions. What surprises me though is that even if they wanted to invent these kind of creatures from scratch, why not just going into the lore, mythical folklore of many different cultures where you could get many different creatures, not just dragons and worms. So that would make it a very good educational tool, as in the game, and a very interesting game because there would be so many different creatures all over the planet.
Well, for me, like I said, I understand the joke about calling it Wormspan instead of Wingspan. So keeping it 2 dragons, of course, but I think you could also expand it to anything that was called a dragon, and that comes like there are the giant serpents that don't have wings that populate Norse mythology. You have the more lion-like Chinese dragons. Like there's so many different things you could tap that educates you a lot on the mythology of a lot of cultures. So you can go into Norse, into Germanic, different, and the differences, the cool differences between the dragons of Japan, the dragons of China, and the dragons of other regions in there, like Korea. I actually had to do research on this for Amethyst. The fact that the different dragons between those 3 Asian countries have different rules about how many fingers they have and why they have those fingers. There is a different rule for each one. So in Japan and China, they I can't remember the distinction because I haven't looked it up in a long time. But one of them dealt with they lose fingers as they age. The other one, they grow fingers as they age, and other aspects as well. There are some very unique distinctions between these dragons that effectively kind of look the same in many ways, which I thought was interesting. So I just thought it'd be more interesting, but I guess that's something that JB will talk to us about. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think it would be a good idea to ask him. But I can imagine also that getting into real life folklore from many different cultures can also be a massive risk of both cultural appropriation and misrepresentation. It would be very easy to make a mistake and really mess it up. From the cultural point of view, so I can see that it's a risk.
For me, like I said, and this is something where for a discussion, I'm sure for another time, when we talk about what classifies as cultural appropriation. And for me, it's always been and this is the thing, when someone says it's cultural appropriation if you're walking around in a kimono.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what's weird though is that if you're in Japan, like when I was in China, I bought a bunch of Chinese clothes, with the wooden toggles and the leather and so forth. And I wear them occasionally. I don't wear them that much. And some may see that's cultural appropriation. I say they are trying desperately to sell. They want people to wear their clothes. They're selling them. They're tourist attractions. They're trying to very much sell them. So they want me to buy their clothes. They want me to wear their clothes. Why am I not allowed to wear what they're selling me in China? And that's one of those situations. And the same thing with the fact that if you go to karate class and you learn karate, so almost saying it's not cultural appropriation, but you're going to be wearing what they have determined to be this is their traditional garb that you wear. It is not cultural appropriation because you are now embedded in that aspect of that culture because you are learning karate, and in karate you wear those clothes. I wore those and I don't think it was cultural appropriation. I never believed using someone's mythology as a cultural appropriation because writers have been inspired by mythology for as long as they've been writing fiction.
Okay, there are two
So
things.
it's difficult for me to really justify that as cultural appropriation, in my humble opinion.
Well, there are several things to be said, and and this is a conversation that I've had many times with people in Facebook, and it really depends on how it is done.
Yeah.
To give you an example, me being from Roma origin, uh, we in Spain invented flamenco. You know that this is
The dance,
ours. The
right?
dance, the music, the guitar, it is ours, nobody else's. The flamenco guitar, even historians cannot find a link between the flamenco guitar and the Japanese kitiara, which is a similar instrument to a guitar. But the flamenco guitar goes back to the 16th century or 17th century, something, or 15th century, something like that. It is ours. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you go to Japan, there is a ginormous following of flamenco with incredible guitarists and fantastic dancers and singers. If you go to the United States, there is one group called Flametal, and they turn flamenco into heavy metal. I love them. Absolutely love them.
I'm incredibly interested in this now. Yeah.
Absolutely love them. Now, the reason why I do not consider those things to be cultural appropriation is because Flametal is using it as an inspiration to create something new, which I approve of, and Japan is imbuing themselves in the culture without changing, without wanting to alter it, or without saying this is ours. You know, they're saying this is flamenco, we love it, we're going to learn. I have absolutely zero problem with that. But when you take something from a different culture and you use it as if it is yours, sorry, no, that is cultural misappropriation.
Yeah. For me, like I said, it's heavily when like if a corporation takes a cultural icon and then repurposes it in a way for them to sell money.
Correct.
It's something like that. Like whenever we see like Kim Kardashian selling kimonos, I'm like,
that is bullshit.
yeah. Like for me, for example, like Amethyst heavily deals with taking like the whole premise of Amethyst is that every mythology, every religion, everything that all the stories that we have told each other was kind of genetically inspired from this age of magic that occurred before we came about, and that this kind of whisper of this age flowed through evolution and genetics to inspire our modern stories. And it was basically a giant justification to say, look, everyone, elves. And so it's like, it's what a coincidence they look like the elves of our fantasy literature. And it might say, actually, it's the other way around. Their existence in the past inspired our stories. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we get it wrong, which is the reason why my stories are a little different. So but all those mythologies have some representation. So there are aspects that are implied. That's a way of like when you look at any D&D world, it's in many ways a cherry picking their mythologies. They pull a little bit of Germanic, a little bit of what Tolkien borrowed from. Then they peel some stuff from Egyptian mythology, and sometimes from Greek, and a lot of fantasy stories are hodgepodges of different mythologies. Amethyst's implication is that they all derived from this old age, millions of years ago before we came about, and things just got translated and misappropriated. It was called ecological influence, the idea that this magical influence permeated and influenced our stories, and that was my way of justifying having a lot of these tropes in the traditional fantasy setting, because Amethyst is supposedly set in the real world in the future. Because I always make conversations with Harry Potter or go, do you think the Lord of the Rings, do the Tolkien books exist in Harry Potter's universe? Because Harry Potter's supposed to be kind of real worldish. It's not an alternative reality, right? Like, so they should have. Would there be like Lord of the Rings books in a library? And someone's like, wow, how did he get so much stuff correct? was Tolkien like? I always find it weird that sci-fi or fantasy stories set in the real world never ever acknowledge,
Overlaps.
they never overlap with other pop culture, right? Like you think that somebody in Star Trek going back in time, as they often do, would go to see Star Wars in the theater. Like, shouldn't that happen? Because Star Trek's supposed to be set in the future, in the real world. Star Wars is the alternate universe. So Amethyst does that. Amethyst constantly, someone like the main character of the novel, Aiden, is a guy who read all of these books, and and it's so he brings up things like I've seen this in this book, and other people have read books in a way, and they'll throw quotes back at him, and they'll get it wrong. Like somebody quotes Harry Potter, but screws up the quote immensely badly. He's like, "You didn't even read the book. That's not even the right quote." But I always find it interesting about that. So I don't consider that cultural appropriation in that fashion, because I think that in many ways we are influencing each other in that way. So when it comes to the dragons, considering that, I mean, I think if you're taking Chinese dragons or Asian dragons in general, and you're calling them another name, and you're using that mythology without directly saying this dragon is from China, I think that could be cultural appropriation, because you're taking that culture and then stripping that history from it. I think that might count as cultural appropriation.
I think that would definitely be misappropriation. Definitely.
I think it'd be more respectful to include this information and say this dragon was like first time it was seen in mythology was in 800 AD in this story or something like that. Somewhere that gives you the seeds of finding that information for yourself.
I just wonder as well, as well as the risk, which don't get me wrong, even if they did it well, there would be potential for mistakes in there. I have seen people publishing role-playing games and them getting into hot water because even though they used different cultural consultants, people didn't like the recommendations of the cultural consultants.
Oh, yeah. People, other interpretations of events in history, correct. And you get one source, and you may end up getting it correct. We've seen it in history how many times that's happened.
Correct. So it's just, as I said, I think it's just risky, but also, to be honest, I mean, what you're presenting, it sounds like the hell of a lot of work. So I wonder whether it is easier to actually create a bunch of dragons or to investigate them properly and thoroughly so you can represent them appropriately.
I guess it depends whether or not you have as much ADHD as I have, where you insist on doing it. Like I said, when I wrote the steampunk section of Taurus for my Affinity novel, I spent 2 days researching trains. Only someone who is as neurodivergent as I am would make sure that all my train lingo was 100% accurate. And I always remember a quote from Francis Ford Coppola, when referencing Apocalypse Now, and he was talking about he had a scene in his film and he needed it to be 100% accurate. He wanted people from that era to go, somebody did their research. And I always remember the fact that if you are doing something and you're playing, like I'm gonna have a sequence with trains, and I'm gonna make it so someone's gonna look at it and go, some real life conductor is gonna read Affinity and went, somebody did their research. Like this, all the train lingo and all the terminology is 100% correct. And someone's going to say, well, at least he tried. It's like whenever you see a science fiction film and I'm like, well, the science seems pretty solid. And I give them credit for having applicable science. So for me, if Jamie Stegmaier called me up and said, hey, Chris, I know you've done a lot of stuff and a lot of research on dragons. Do you want to do research on dragons? I'd be like, give me 1 week. I will give you 200 dragons and 400-word essays on each one. Because that's, like, for me, to get that level of accuracy would be something that I would want to do and want to make sure that I would do right. But that's, once again, that's not everyone wants to do that.
I think you're just pitching yourself as the next Wormspan expansion designer.
Yeah. Well,
so is it. So, okay, you had more things. Well, you have already mentioned the errata for tapestry, which is like, wow, 3 times. That's like,
yeah. Well, the issue is that people don't know Tapestry. Tapestry is a game where it is I did a review for the Dice Tower. In fact, it was a review that got me kicked off the Dice Tower, which is on my home channel, where I go into details about Tapestry. Tapestry is a very abstract civilization building game. You pick a idea, which is what the core of your civilization is. You pick a land, a kind of arrangement of land, and then like you pick up the core of your culture. And this was very abstract, and we got a little bit more specific, very specific with the new expansion. And then you basically move up these 4 and later 5 trackers. And as you get these trackers, you get buildings you can put on your land to basically create your capital city. And you get to do unlocks like observatories and stadiums, eventually rocket ships and so forth. But you are never really required to follow the paths in any set order, which creates hilarious things where you can develop space travel but not math, right? Because there's a cultural one, like there's architecture, there's sciences and so forth, and there's a military path. And then in my review, which I'm sure is what triggered somebody, I made a joke that there was no religious path. There was no path for any form of
Theocracy.
traditions or culture.
Okay.
A theocracy, yeah. It was military, which I thought was a bizarre choice. A military and then so forth. And then they got art. Art was in the expansion. So development of art didn't come until an expansion, which I thought was a little interesting that they weaved that one. But it's a very nice path. So it's science, technology, exploration, and military. So those are the 4 paths: science, technology, exploration, military. And you don't have to follow them in any specific order. And then you get massive amounts of points. And then you go by eras. And there are 4 eras in the game. And once you finish era 4, the game basically concludes. I always thought the game ended too soon, and this new expansion adds a new era, which I thought was very interesting. So we would go on for 5 eras. So I was going to say it's actually 5 eras, but it's a number of additional of these civilization cards. Because when you start a new era, you enter a new era of your civilization. So you play a card in your path that sets you on this new direction. Now the issue is the core starting path. The core had massively asymmetrical abilities. So your core ability could completely rewrite how you played your game. There were huge aspects, and there's like 30 or 40 of these now. So there are ridiculously vast ideas. But it also created situations where it was very clear that they did not fully test every one of these to fully see they were balanced. Because if you got the right era card to the right civilization card, you could create really crazy feedback loops that gave you massive amounts of points or money that allows you to build things. Some of them got really nuts. And for me, with my brain, I would look through the choices and go, okay, I'm picking this one because it seems crazy. And then you get a handful of cards to choose for your era card, and like, well, those two really work together. The last time I played with Nicole, we played with the latest one, not this one we just got, because we just got it like a couple days ago, but with the one that added art, and it adds a new tracker. This is the one where I got to 5. I actually almost maxed out the point tracker in Tapestry. Nicole got about half as many points as me. Like it was resoundingly just annihilation. And it was because I had a civilization card and an era card in the first era of my game that had this insane feedback loop that gave me a bunch of additional resources. And so I knew within the first 10 minutes of the game, I was like, oh, she's completely effed. This is completely broken. And so by the time that era ended, I had such a massive lead. It became exponential. Even though the later eras weren't as hugely damaging, that first era was so unbelievably broken. It gave me an edge that caused this exponential growth that I never ever stopped. So it's when they came out with the first expansion, they had a little page that gave you an errata that nerfed some of the civilization cards from the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember talking to you about the fact that we got the second expansion, which was this art gun that added the tracker. And it added new civilization cards that were more broken than the core ones. And so with with this new one, I haven't seen them, but there is a new manual and a new errata and a new revision of the rules. So that's one of the reasons why they put out a brand new rule book and a bunch of like there's actually 3 sets of cards here because like this has the new Era 5 card, which is we're going to look forward to trying. But the other thing they have here is a bunch of cards to replace cards from the previous expansions because they were too broken to let go. And so there's that, and then we have the new civilization cards and the new region cards. Some of these are really interesting. You get a swamp, a savanna, but you also have really fantasy ideas like city in a bottle, the underworld, and so forth. And in the civilization cards, we now have artificers, celestial, elder ones, fae folk, genies, Illuminati, merfolk. It says fantasies and futures, but it seems very clear that this is almost entirely fantasy. I only see a handful of cards that are not like magic.
Okay, well, maybe you can tell us about that when you play and see how they sort out all these issues. Because we have 15 minutes left, and there's something else that we want to talk about. Actually, 2 things. One, I want to bring up the latest AI scandals in brackets that have been going on with Pelgrane Press has used AI generated images in one of the Yellow King or the King in Yellow expansion written by Robin D. Laws, and he wrote an essay as eloquent as you would expect from him about why that's been the case and how they've tried to ethically source these images from ethically trained stable diffusion models, which has been received with a lukewarm reaction. You know, we've seen an awful lot of people with the no, all AI is bad, and then we've seen some people with it's fine. And it's a bit like, oh my god, okay, this is not going to be fun. And then we also have Nightfall Games, who has had to pull out of one of the Terminator expansions 16 illustrations because one of the artists that they hire, who is still, as far as I know, unnamed, so we don't know who that person is, provided with work that had been AI created. So Nightfall Games decided, nope, this is not going to happen. So off all of these illustrations go, and their new illustrations are going to be made for it. And I haven't really seen any of the illustrations that are taken out or what they have to replace it with or who's the artist, but those 2 things are happening. So yeah, AI keeps on making the news. They've been talking, people have been talking about how Wizards of the Coast, somebody put some of their images through an AI detector program. And the AI detector said, yes, this is all AI. And then it came out that actually, no, it was not.
Yeah, because it turns out the detectors are AI themselves and thus flawed.
Yeah, and the percentage of, getting it right is not particularly relatable right now. It's not dependable. I don't think you can trust it right now. So yeah, AI keeps on making the news at the moment. And then we have the viral post that you wanted to talk about.
Like I said, it's as I've said, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think personally, most of the time the controversy, I think the controversy is diminishing. I think it's quietening. I think it's unfortunate, and that there is still this knee-jerk reactionary, and that there is these people just. And the funny thing is like I said, I can't have a debate with people who are hardline on this because they can't answer the questions. When I ask them the questions, they just get angry.
Wait a second.
And I-
Wait a second. Are we talking about AI still?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Sorry, I thought we were moving away from. Yeah, I think this is going to continue for a bit. So that's why I just like to report about these things that have been going on, so people are aware about it. But I'm not going to go into debate because it's just pointless. Now, I was talking more about this viral post about that Ben Riggs posted in Facebook that has become very popular.
Yeah, I ended up doing a video on it where I did a reaction to it. And for me, so the people who don't know, Ben Riggs is a friend. We have 82 mutuals. He's got 1.3K friends. I honestly wish I knew what his background. I mean, obviously he's an author. I don't know him, and I will admit I feel like a bad person. But he obviously is an author. He wrote a book called Slaying the Dragon. So he's a published author, which in many ways is better than me. He wrote it looks like it's a biopic, A Secret History of Dungeons and Dragons by Ben Riggs. That's his book.
Yes, I've also read the book. It's very entertaining. It is really, really fun to read. And he's basically gone through interviewing an awful lot of people from the old TSR, as many as he's been able to find, and asked them some really tough questions. And people have given some really tough answers as to what was going on with TSR, what happened with Gary Gygax in there, how he was kicked off, how the whole Lorraine Williams debacle. He tried to reach Lorraine Williams and she declined to do an interview because she doesn't want to be defending herself. There's an awful lot that she has to defend herself for, definitely. So it's actually a very interesting book, and he's a very knowledgeable guy. I have 336 mutuals in Facebook with him. I like him. I genuinely like him.
You have more friends than me because people like you.
Some people like me.
So he made a post on I can't see the date on it, but it was some weeks ago about what he felt was the golden age of tabletop role-playing games is dying. And the problem, I won't go into details because it'll take forever just to read it. But the gist of it is that with what happened almost a year ago this month, a year ago this week, because I actually got tagged in my Facebook memory just a couple of days ago that this exploded. So it was a year ago this week that we had the debacle regarding the OGL reversal and WotC's policies, which ended up in a very quick fashion just fragmenting and fracturing the industry. And it caused the same amount of damage that we saw happen way back in 2008 with 4th edition. When 4th edition came out with this GSL and how much it fractured that industry. And it was a death knell for a lot of people, and a lot of companies are not doing well. I mean, my company, my sales have been dropping steadily this whole year, and I don't know whether or not I'll be publishing to this extent this time next year. It's going to really depend on the next project, I think. And for me, I could see his point. Like, he's making a valid point. He is talking about the fact that when you have one large system that everybody uses, a lot of people can publish for that system because it has a very large market share. When you fracture that system, that market into a dozen different systems, and there's no dominant, you don't know who you can write for because there's no money to be made because you're not making any money. Because if it's like it's a simple thing, and I know it personally, the fact that you write a book, you write it for a system, and that makes some amount of money because it has a 10% of the market share. If you wrote a product for a game company for a rule system that had 50% of the market share, you're going to make more money off of that product because it has a larger market share. And that was the simple point. He gave a very bizarre comparison to the 90s when TSR put out crap tons of different games with different rule systems, and then they all started failing, and then WotC bought TSR's library and went on from there. And I said, that's not a good comparison. The comparison you need to make is a few years later with 2003. When they came out with 3.5 and the OGL, D&D came back in a big bad way. Everyone started playing D&D. A lot of companies appeared out of nowhere to start making money off of this OGL, including companies that became really big in 2008 with 4th edition games like Mongoose and Paizo. A lot of these companies came out during this time period. And that exploded. And then in 2008, they screwed everyone up with the GSL and 4th edition. The market fractured. We had Paizo, we had all these companies, and then companies that were making money, they started going out of business. We lost a lot of companies during the 2008 to 2010 4th edition debacle. And then a bunch of other companies started making their own systems. Dungeon Crawl Classics, 13th Age, Pathfinder. These came out and they absorbed a lot of the people that were getting angry at 4th edition.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I came out with my 2014 Kickstarter, I had to make it for 5 different systems. And I barely made any money. It took me 5 years to complete it because I was writing the same book for 4 different systems, and it was a nightmare. Fast forward, 2015, 5th edition comes out, completely takes over the industry. Suddenly, everybody's converting their stuff for 5e. I suddenly make crap tons of money. I run 3 Kickstarters for 5th edition and make $100,000 each. And now we're in this situation where, because of what happened a year ago, they all broke off from 5th edition. Like, we're going to do our own 5th edition with blackjack and hookers. And we got Black Flag, and we had the MCDM has their new own system, and Critical Role has their own system. And suddenly, we're now having these competing systems to 5th edition because they don't want to have to answer to D&D and Wizards of the Coast anymore. And they've done exactly what they did back in 2010. They fractured this market. Now, the people, every time somebody criticizes Ben Riggs' post, they say the same thing. It's like, I prefer a market with lots of different systems that gives people choice, that they get to buy. There's so many different visions and different ideas. And I said, that's great. It is a very, very small market, because back in 1999 or 2005 or so, I can't remember what it was, I was talking with the publisher of Green Ronin Games, and he said more people use the role-playing games as their primary income that have walked on the moon. Almost every person that publishes role-playing games can't use it as their primary profession because the market is so small. And the best way I can explain it is we look at game systems. Back in the 90s, we had, I worked at Radio Shack, we had the 3DO, we had the
Neo Geo, the CDI.
Neo Geo, we had the Amigo, we had all these systems. And all of them failed because they did not have games. They did not have games because the game publishers look, okay, what's the 2 biggest markets? Oh, Nintendo, PlayStation. We're going to make it for those games, those systems, because they have 80% of the market shared between them. I'm not going to make a game for the 3DO. The market, there's only 500,000 of them on the market. And this is, and this is the reason why we went from having a dozen different game systems in the late 80s and the early 90s to 3, Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation, because you can't do that. And this is also the reason why there's only 2 operating systems that anyone uses, Mac and PC, and nobody plays on the Mac. So you have to, so you're not going to make a game that only uses the Unix. You're going to make it that's going to be compatible for PC. You're going to make it compatible for Steam, because Steam's is one of the only marketplaces. Yeah, we have a couple of other marketplaces, but it's still only a single solitary system. We have 2 graphic card companies with different standards, but It's really easy to make your product for those 2 standards. D&D, people need to think of D&D as an operating system. It is a language that people can use. And they did that last year by donating it to the Creative Commons and making it free source.
Okay.
And to walk away and create a dozen different competing 5e systems is going to create a fractured market where small publishers are making no money.
Okay, wait a second. I think we need to introduce a little bit of nuance on this, because there's an awful lot to unpack to what you just said in there. Firstly, one of the points that Ben was making is that regardless of what has happened with the OGL and how now it is Creative Commons, what matters is what's going to happen with 6th edition, which is meant to be coming out by Gen Con. Okay, so the point is that if the new license agreement that Wizards of the Coast comes out with is as restrictive as the license agreement that they released with 4th edition, that could hurt Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons future because the OGL, with all these peripheral micro, derivative systems out there, are. So the point is that D&D could suffer. And if D&D, which is the biggest, suffers, the whole industry will suffer, and therefore the RPG as a conglomerate will suffer. That is the, as I understood, that is the premise that Ben was talking about.
Well, there was a right.
Okay. Now there is the peripheral systems that Paizo, Kobold Press, Critical Role, all those people are creating because they don't want to have to answer to anybody else. I reckon that some of them are going to die. Some of them are going to say, oh, wait a second, this is not working. Let's go back to the OGL. As soon as they know that they don't have to answer to Wizards of the Coast stroke Hasbro anymore. That is the key issue. Now, what I wonder is, if Dungeons and Dragons disappeared as we know it today, which is very unlikely because D&D is making an awful lot of money, and it could keep making an awful lot of money if Larian Studios keeps making amazing video games based on D&D. I look forward to Baldur's Gate 4 or Ravenloft 1 or Dark Sun 11, whatever. But I look forward to
I just
those.
love the fact that you can romance a mind flayer in that game. But go on.
Okay. So from that point of view, this is what I think we need to make a distinction. When he says the golden age of RPGs is over, no. The golden age of RPGs for businesses may be over. It's been, as you said, it has been.
You have to define what golden age means.
And for whom? Most importantly, for whom? Because as you said, it has been easier to make money out of role-playing games over the last 5-6 years than ever before. Simple as that. Not everybody's been able to make as much money because even though it is easier, also it is true that there are thousands of people making content for 5e. Literally, pretty much every project in Kickstarter is 5e related. And if you go to the GM's Guild, there are thousands upon thousands of little products that you will never be able to have them all, read them all, or sustain all of them. But it is true that more people than ever have been able to do it. Will that continue? I doubt it. So from that point of view, from the business point of view, yes, there is going to be a decline in the number of people being able to make money out of it. But as far as we are concerned, the consumer is concerned, there are now more RPGs being published than ever. There are more successful companies publishing role-playing games than ever. It is easier to publish and write role-playing games than ever. And it is increasingly becoming easier, whether we like it or not is a different matter altogether, to illustrate RPGs than ever. There are more indie games than ever, and they are more accessible than ever. Exactly how is that not the golden age of role-playing games for the consumer?
Because, and I think it comes down entirely to perspective. And this is something I'll probably do because the fact that in one of my blog videos, the fact that it comes down to the point is, where are you looking at it from? I'm looking at it from the fact that, and I'm a person that obviously doesn't subscribe to free market capitalism, but I'm a person that also subscribes to the fact that I wish everybody could make a living off of what they love and their passion. And I believe a golden age, I always think of historical the idea where you could have prosperity and satisfaction. And for me, that's a double, that means you need a situation where both consumers and the producers are happy. And that's that golden age of satisfaction and happiness. And I think that there was a absolute wonderful period. When the OGL came out, I think in 2016, that we had a moment that lasted until recently where a bunch of people could make money doing what they love and get it absorbed by people who loved it. Because as you got more people getting into the industry, you got more people willing to try new things. And I said that if D&D were to magically vanish, you wouldn't see, let's say there's 30 million people playing role-playing games. Let's say 100 million. Let's be really, really generous. 100 million people playing role-playing games. And you break it up into who's playing what, with obvious overlap with people who play multiple systems. They've showed it pretty consistently that that overlap almost doesn't exist. People like being loyal to one system. There are very few people that overlap that constantly play different systems. If you cut D&D and say D&D no longer exists, you would not see, and in D&D we know 70% of that market share is playing D&D. If you cut D&D out, that 70% isn't going to trickle to the remaining 30% of games. A vast majority of them won't bother, or they'll go back to playing their old games. You're not going to see this massive glut market of people that are willing to spend their money on different systems.
I don't know.
I think people think that I want multiple systems, and I go, yeah, but if you have multiple systems, you're going to see, in my opinion, a massive reduction of professionally made games by third-party developers because they just can't make the money.
Okay, but the thing is, Chris, you're basing your hypothesis on a premise that cannot possibly happen.
Well, it's true, but we're talking. You were just mentioning just now about if you could remove D&D.
Okay, but that's the thing. My point is, if you get rid of Dungeons and Dragons as a brand, it wouldn't matter, because there is already so much material and the rules are there that people would be able to continue creating Dungeons and Dragons even if it is under a different name. D&D.
I'll make a I got to disagree with you. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't believe that Dungeons and Dragons is as big as the people who play it. Seriously, I don't think it is. I think D&D is huge because people are playing it, and the people who love it, they are going to keep playing it, creating their own material. You know, one of the reasons why adventures don't sell as well as core books is because a lot of people write their own material. And if you had to change the name of Baldur's Gate for the Gate of Baldur, people will do that so they can keep playing in the unforgettable realms, and then, you know, instead of the forgotten realms. So I don't think that is an issue. But also, I just don't think that D&D is going to disappear. It's just not going to happen.
Well, the D&D itself is not going to disappear. Where I disagree, and I'll try to make this quick. The reason why I think I disagree is I know the cult-like personalities people have. Their unflattering loyalty to Brandomers and the idea of being fiercely connected to specific things. So yes, I think there are a lot of people that would say, well, we're making a variation of Forgotten Realms. I go, well, I'm just going to stick with Forgotten Realms because it's something I'm used to. People are very conservative in the role-playing industry. We've shown that very clearly, especially with OSR. But I said in my video that we have this year, MCDM, Critical Role, all these companies going freaking nuts with all their internal systems. Gen Con happens. They come out and say, yes, this is officially 6th edition. We are doing all of this. We're offering all of this. And 6th edition is going to be completely open as well. It's going to go Creative Commons the same as 5th edition. And not only that, we're going to up the game and we're going to repeat what we did with 5th edition and go more. And think of people, well, this won't happen. It's happened 3 times. This will be the 3rd time it's happened. We had multiple systems. 3.5 comes out with OGL. Everyone drops it, goes to D&D. 2015, all these different systems that came out after the failure of 4th edition. 5th edition comes out OGL. Everyone drops everything else, goes 5th edition. If they decided in 2024 to say, hey, we're doing 6th edition, it's going to go to OGL, What makes you think everyone's going to go, nope, we're going to stick with MCDM. Nope, we're going to stick with Black Flag. A lot of people are just going to drop those like a dead habit and go back to D&D like they did before.
That's going to depend on what the terms and conditions of the new licensing system is.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, after the OGL fiasco, Hasbro is going to have to tread on eggshells to make sure that they don't fuck up again. Because at the slightest mistake that they do with their licensing, people are going to say, screw you, I'm continuing with this, which is Creative Commons.
And the part that bothers me, and I keep on saying this because I hate, people wonder, I was talking about who I follow on social media when it comes to D&D. I follow like 3 people, and they're all small, low tier. One of them is a bit higher D&D, and he has his own little opinion on that. I don't follow any of the big ones. And the reason why I don't is I get so angry at how reactionary they are. They create these clickbaity things. Someone says, well, 6th edition is coming out on this thing. They have never, Wizards of the Coast has never once called this 1D&D. They have not mentioned 1D&D since the fiasco a year ago. They haven't mentioned 6th edition since the fiasco a year ago. There has been no public announcements from anybody within Wizards talking about a brand new revised version, because 3 was incompatible to 4, 4 was incompatible to 5, and people are saying 6 is going to be incompatible. There is no evidence, any official evidence anywhere about that 6th edition even exists or what it has. And people are still making assumptions on top of assumptions. There was the announcement of 1D&D, which happened at the end of December of 2022. And then we had the fiasco of the OGL. They released things for Creative Commons, and they have been silent on that front ever since. There is still, outside of what we've seen with the new revision of 1D&D, these playtest rules, which they have not updated in 8 months, because I've not seen any emails from Wizards of the Coast for updated rules. All their architecture, they have changed the system less than what Black Flag did with 5th edition, when people complained that Black Flag was too close to 5th edition. So far, all they've done is made a couple quality of living increases and changed a few things around. They have not fundamentally made this new 6th edition incompatible with 5e. At the best, this is 5.5.
Well, and that's the other thing, and this is also another possibility that we need to consider. Maybe they have said, okay, with all of this fragmentation, let's stop. Let's wait to see which one of these survives, because some of them may go down, some of them may not. Let's see which one of these is the most popular, which one of these people like the most, and we will release the 6th edition based on that in a year or 2 years' time. Because at the end of the day, D&D is healthy. It is still selling. Let's face it, 5th edition could still sell for a number of years, because I don't think anybody is demanding a 6th edition. People was demanding a change from 2nd to 3rd edition. And people were already, we need a 4th edition D&D. We need something new, something fresh. And definitely people needed a 5th edition. We all were desperate for that.
Yeah.
So
I was still, sorry.
Maybe that is another possibility. The things that we really don't know. And going back to Ben's post and this kind of apocalyptic statement, the golden age of role-playing games is over. It's a bit, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I don't see it.
I think one of the most important takeaways, he was talking about how much money MCDM and Black Flag made with their Kickstarters, and he said those are going to be the most successful Kickstarters they will have done relating to that property. They will see, and I 100% agree. I totally believe that these people are jumping on the bandwagon, but I don't believe these variant systems have any legs. I think that they're going to. I think maybe Critical Role might. But I didn't even know the name. I had to learn what the Critical Role system was reading Ben Riggs' post, because I have no interest in it whatsoever.
And sorry, let me interrupt you there. And that is what I think is actually critical. The fact that people are not necessarily... No, seriously. I don't know. I don't think that people are actually necessarily interested in the game itself, but in the people behind the game. So this is a personality cult, not a game cult.
That's totally right.
So
And that's why I think Critical Role has the best chance of succeeding because of the celebrity status. I don't think the guy who created MCDM, I mean, he's hugely popular. He has tens of thousands of people. I don't think he has enough recognition to keep that name going. Not like Critical
Matt
Role.
Colville, this is not the first multi-million Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign he makes.
Yeah, I know, but
So from that point of view, maybe we don't think he does. I would be very surprised. And can you imagine what will happen if something like Critical Role and Matt Colville joined forces?
that would be interesting.
So
Matt
that,
Colville has 400,000 subscribers. Critical Role has 2.1 million. There is a distinctive different marketplace there. Critical Role is huge.
it's massive, but I don't think that people watch Critical Role because they play role-playing games. I think people watch Critical Role because they are entertaining, and they're good at being good actors in front of the camera.
Oh yeah,
I don't know, out of those 2.1 million people, how many of them played Dungeons and Dragons or Candela Obscura? I don't know. It would be very interesting to see the viewing figures between D&D playthroughs and Candela Obscura, because if those numbers do kind of vary a little bit but not enough, that means that people watch them, not the game, and that would be quite telling. And it would not surprise me at all. You know, let's face it, they are good. So from that point of view, who knows? But I don't know where I was going with this. But yeah, so people are interested in the people who play the games, not the games necessarily. That is, if Matt Colville had come out with something completely different, people would still have bought. Maybe not in the same numbers, but they would have gone with it because it is him. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. And people have gone away from D&D not because they dislike the game, but because they dislike Hasbro and what they've done. And they've lost a lot of customers because of that. So let's not get ourselves away from the importance of the personality cult, because that is huge.
I think D&D didn't fully. I think the biggest mistake WotC made, they didn't fully understand how much D&D is run by social media, and they can't control the narrative because so many people can adjust people's opinions through their social media. Matt Colville did 3 videos relating to D&D in the last few months, where he usually does videos every week. Now he's entirely focused on his. WotC has lost that channel. They've lost 400,000 subscribers. Those people. Critical Role switching system. So I think the biggest thing that Wizards should do going forward is to try to re-win, not general public, but re-win these people. I don't think I don't think they need to care about Black Flag, but I think they need to try to re-win their social media channels back. And that was the biggest thing. That was the miss. When you look at the whole thing, that was probably their biggest blunder. They lost the social media people.
And you know what I find what I find funny about that? In 2019, when I spoke with somebody from Wizards of the Coast in the UK, and I said, you know, what can we do for you to help us create more games, you know, at shops and stores? I said, we are going to devote all the effort into streaming. If you're good with streaming, then we're going to support you. So you need to become big at streaming. So considering that they had very clear that they were going to support the online presence of Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, it's amazing to think 2 things. One, how badly they fucked it up with streamers, because let's not forget the blunder that this, influencer con kind of thing that they did that was absolutely appalling. And secondly, that they have not been able to create their own influencers, their own media content creators, for Wizards of the Coast. They have relied on external people who, rightly so, they're perfectly entitled, have turned their backs on them. And the fact that they couldn't see that coming, it's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, there's obviously someone just like, that's where it's the same that saw the Barbie movie and said, hey, what other toys can we make into movies? And you're like, people are like, did you not watch the movie? Do you not see why that movie was like good? It wasn't because it was just Barbie. It was because what the film was about.
Yes.
What it was doing. I never grew up with Barbie. I've never owned a Barbie. No interest in Barbie. I goddamn love that movie.
Yes, me
I
too.
love that movie so much. I own Oppenheimer and Barbie. If someone were to tell me, what do you want to watch first? I go, I might want to watch
Barbie.
Barbie
Yeah.
because Barbie is such, oh God, it's just, there's so many things, you know, like, and Oppenheimer probably, like, when it comes to technically, it is such a superior film in so many levels, but Barbie is just Barbie.
Yeah.
But, and you know, now we're going to make the American Girl doll movie. And I'm like,
Yeah, no, it's not going to happen.
when you look at Barbie, you look at the Lego movie and you realize, like, why did those films, they go, those films weren't good because of their name. They were good because they were good.
Good.
They were good because they gave that IP to people that took the piss out of it. And I guess it's something they have to learn. And I think that's what I think I'm worried that Hasbro is populated by those same people that don't fully understand their own IP and just kind of run it the way they do without really knowing. Like, you realize that's not how the system works.
Well, no, I
You
mean, they
need
didn't understand their own.
grassroots. Yeah.
They didn't understand their own company, for goodness sake. They've got rid of some of the best people in Wizards of the Coast over the last couple of months. So, as far as I'm concerned, you know, screw them. But anyway, well, I think I think we're both in agreement that no, the golden age of RPGs is nowhere near over, and the best is, I think, as far as I'm concerned, the best is yet to come. So,
Well, I don't know if I could say that we agree on that. I think that there's a potential for a threat that Wizards can fix, but they don't seem to be capable of fixing it because they hadn't fixed it before. They waited until something broke and then tried to do damage control. And that's different. So unfortunately, I'm worried that they're going to wait for this thing to break until they try to recover it. So we'll have to wait and see.
yes, indeed. So anyway, until then, humans, what do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts on this matter or any other, you know, because why not? So do leave us a comment. You can always find me on Twitter, since I refuse to call it anything else. I am at GMS Magazine. I am also GMS Magazine in Facebook, where I dwell like a troll very, very often. So please say hello. And you can always email on podcast@gmsmagazine.com, where I promise I will read them eventually as soon as I possibly can. But thank you very much indeed for being there.
And this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. Find me on Deus Ex Machina on all social media channels, and also now Tavern Snaps. We forgot to talk about. Oh, we'll talk about it next week. The massive lawsuit that's being filed against Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon.
Yes,
my favorite disposable heroes. We can't wait to talk about that. I got
yes,
thoughts on that. Anyway,
that's
so
going
that
to be
is
next
me.
week.
Yeah, exactly. Or not, depending if we get Jamie next week.
Yes.
All right, thanks, guys.
Have a good one.
Have a better one.